Greetings. In this video, I'm going to discuss favoring the weak fingers. Now, what I mean by that is that some fingers are stronger than others. For example, my pinky, not so strong. Pointer finger, far more strong. Now, the pinky has a lot of sideways mobility, and the index finger has a lot of sideways mobility. These middle fingers kind of struggle. They can do it to a degree, but it's just not the same. It doesn't compare to the mobility of your pointer finger. Well, your pointer finger has the strength. You know, these guys are pretty much all three around the same amount of strength, but that index finger has much more mobility. So our index finger has kind of the mobility of the pinky, but the strength of these other guys, kind of best of both worlds. So for these four fingers, pointer fingers, very, very strong. And our pinky is just kind of tricky to work with. You know, the longer you're a musician, the more you're going to develop a pinky that's going to be more reliable and useful, especially if you are intentional to use it a lot. But when we talk about favoring the weak finger, what I mean is that I might choose a fingering that's a little harder on the strong fingers to make it easier for the weak fingers. So let's look at a C chord, for example. So C right here. My guitar might be out of tune. I haven't checked, but I'm going to go ahead and start with these two fingers. I'm going to put my middle finger right next to the fret. And then I'm going to put that ring finger. He doesn't want to move sideways from here, right? It's just kind of how our hand is built, is moving these two fingers apart under these circumstances, not so easy. So I'm just going to drop him where he goes comfortably on this guy. So for me, he ends up around the middle fret, and then I just press tightly enough that I get a nice clear C. Okay? So this guy goes as far as up as he can without being on top of the fret. And then I just drop this guy where he's comfortable. And I'm keeping my fingers straight. You see that? They're a nice good alignment. And now my pointer finger, he's just going to reach out by himself because he's really strong and really mobile. And if I do that, boom, you got a nice C chord where all my notes ring out nice and clear. Now, here's the opposite. Usually people want to start with their pointer finger. So they come in like this at this angle, they put their pointer finger in, and then they try to reach up like that. And that's usually how you see people do a C chord. And it's doable, but it's a lot harder on the weaker fingers. These fingers are weaker and less precise than my index finger. So if I can actually come at it this way and then just reach over with my pointer finger, I'm making it easier for these fingers that are weak. So this comes up in all sorts of situations. If I'm having trouble hitting something consistently with my pinky, usually what's happening, I see students do this a lot where their hand is tilted at this kind of angle right here. So here's aligned, here's this kind of open wedge, okay? So they do this, and then they try to reach with their pinky, but their pinky's having to move a whole inch or inch and a half. Whereas if you can align your hand here, so instead of the wedge, we're bringing it in, and then I curl my fingers really far. Now my pinky can do this while barely moving. And if I want to do a pentatonic scale, see, I'm keeping my pinky very, very close to where he needs to be. And he doesn't have to skip really far. He's just right there already. So if I make it really easy for my pinky, then sometimes that means having to reach a little farther with my index finger, right? So if I build it off of my pointer finger, my pinky has to reach really far. But if I start with my pinky, well, yeah, my pointer naturally lines up to this fret, so I have to kind of stretch out my hand and reach him out, which is fine because he's got the strength and the accuracy that I can depend on him to find it way better. So this comes up in all sorts of situations. One might be, let's say I'm doing arpeggios. Well, if I center my right hand to where it's really easy for my pointer finger, well now it's kind of hard and awkward for my ring finger, who's just kind of feels short and wants to bump two strings. But if I tilt my hand down to where it's easiest for my ring finger, well, now my pointer finger can just extend a little bit more. It's a little bit more work for him, puts him a little bit out of position. But my weakest finger that's involved in this situation does this easily, no problem. So this is a really, really valuable technique, and it applies all over the place. I've been amazed at how many different situations this is applied to, and I just provided a couple of left hand examples and a right hand example. This applies to both hands all the time. If you're having issues with accuracy in a fingering, try making it easiest for your pinkies or your ring fingers, and then see where everything else can kind of reach and line up from there. If you do that, it's going to fix a lot of problems you're probably wrestling with already. I would encourage you to experiment with this and just see how many different ways it applies to your playing. It makes a huge difference for me all the time, and it's one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned. Thank you very much for watching, and God bless.